I had an audition for essentially enemies in like a Souls-like game. And so
Mhm.
part of that involves at the end of the auditions, they'll always be like, give us, 3 attacks, small, medium, large. Give us 3 injury sounds, small, medium, large. And give us 3 death sounds, small, medium, large. And so
Medium death.
medium death. Yeah. So the tactic to kind of like make sure you're not blowing out the ears of whoever's listening to your audition is to just turn the gain down and then just like lean back and scream in the booth. But yeah, I forgot that I was doing that. That was the last thing I was recording. And so I was like, oh, I need to turn that back up so you can hear me now.
Yes. Hopefully no death screams on this podcast.
No death screams in this podcast. I do hope so.
Yes, never know.
You never know.
We'll shoot for no. Hello and welcome to the Fast and Broken podcast, where we take a critical look at the fast-moving world of tech and online culture. I'm Carly Richter, a software engineer and startup founder who is definitely tracking UBI stuff, which we'll talk about later.
And I'm Teresa Kramer. I'm a project manager, MBA student, and a semi-pro voice actor, who also very interested in universal basic income stuff because that's very like relevant for people like in artistic careers, especially right now as I'm on the job hunt, is extremely relevant to my interests. So
Yes. Yeah.
mhm.
Basically comes around to that in almost every conversation lately. I feel like
Mhm.
it's just like we just need that. That
Yeah,
solves so many problems.
it does. It really does.
But yeah, so actual topics for today. We're going to talk about the Jimmy Kimmel saga. Kind of late to that, but I came up with a particular focus that I think is relevant to this podcast and will
Mhm.
involve saying something new about it versus just like retreading what everyone else has talked about.
Right.
So hopefully that'll be interesting. We will talk about the recent trend in releasing AI short video feeds, which both OpenAI and Meta have released lately. And then we will talk about some UBI stuff because there's some interesting updates on experiments that people do there that I think are interesting to talk about since we just talked
Yay.
about kind of theoretically before.
Yeah, definitely.
I have actually written up a whole like primer here because I want to make sure we get the whole facts of the Jimmy Kimmel thing on the table first.
Yes.
And because that's one of the things that bothers me about this kind of discourse is like 48 hours in and people are just like talking about it, assuming everyone has the same shared basis for it. And
Mhm.
they just sometimes don't. People weren't following it or they just interpreted things in different ways or like they never heard the actual quote. So summary of what happened factually. So starting obviously on September 10th, when Charlie Kirk, who is the founder of Turning Point USA, which is a conservative political organization, was fatally shot while he was speaking at Utah Valley University. A few days later, Monday, September 15th, Jimmy Kimmel, who is a comedian and host of the ABC late night show Jimmy Kimmel Live, which he's been running since 2003, commented on the shooting during his monologue at the show. The particular quote that people objected to was, "We hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them." So when I hear that, I interpret it as referring to comments that were sort of declaring what the killer's ideology were when we didn't know anything about him. We still don't know that much about him, but like right
Yeah.
after the shooting, we knew nothing at all. And Elon Musk tweeted, "The left is the party of murder." And Trump and tons of other conservative commentators said, yeah, this is the radical leftist, probably funded by big left-wing organizations.
Mm.
However, people without that context often interpreted him stating that the killer was MAGA, and therefore it was like, he's just straight up lying on his show. This should be illegal. But one of the people who objected strongly to him, quote, lying was the chairman of the FCC, Brendan Carr, who the next day after that suggested that Disney, which is ABC's parent company, should do something or the FCC might have to step in. And, quote, "You could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. Quote, we can do this the easy way or the hard way." A lot of people calling out that he basically just sounds like a mafioso saying that and is
Yeah.
threatening action here and basically saying that people need to get in line.
Mhm.
And then people did get in line. A few hours after that, Nexstar, which is a sort of conglomerate that operates 28 ABC affiliates, said it would not broadcast the show for the foreseeable future. And shortly after that, ABC said it was suspending the show entirely. So
Mhm.
there was a lot of backlash against this because it was such a clear violation of free speech, people thought, which
Yeah.
is like, This is clearly a government agent threatening intervention into something that is very clearly speech, and people taking action to cancel him based on that, basically.
Mhm.
And even on some of the in conservative circles, people were like, "Well, we can't do this. Like, it doesn't matter how much I dislike the thing that he was saying. We can't have this happening. This is free speech." Um, so there's backlash against that. And about a week later, ABC announced that his show was reinstated. So that's
Yeah.
good, at least. Although some of the Next Star stations were still not broadcasting the show when he came
Mhm.
back September 23rd. But nevertheless, his comeback show got about 4 times its usual viewership when he was back on the air. So that's the factual narrative of things that happened. The specific things that I thought were interesting to talk about for us, which are not really mentioned that much, is sort of how this relates to digital media and online media and that versus existing like television media and stuff like that. So one of the things is that these quotes from Brendan Carr, the chairman of the FCC, were not like a press release or him going on a news show. They were on a right-wing podcast. So like he was
Mhm.
on a podcast saying these things. And a lot of people don't mention that in their articles that it was on a podcast or just say it was a right-wing podcast. I had to do a little bit of searching to even find what podcast it was on.
Mhm.
Um, which it turns out was this right wing guy, Benny Johnson, who
Mhm.
is a right wing commentator. He has a whole controversies section on his Wikipedia page. And among other things, he was a contributor to Turning Point USA.
Yeah.
So very, very right wing. This was not like a nonpartisan situation at all. At time of recording, the title of this YouTube video where he was making these quotes on is Jimmy Kimmel lies, all caps, about Charlie Kirk killer. Blames Charlie for his murder? Exclamation point, question mark. Disney must fire Kimmel. So like that's the context in which the chairman of the SEC was making these comments. And then also interesting is Jimmy Kimmel's comeback show got 6.2 million viewers, which, like mentioned, is about 4 times his normal viewership. But his comeback monologue on YouTube got 15 million viewers the next day when it was posted, and
Mhm.
a time of recording has 22 million viewers. So much more people are watching this on YouTube than they were on television.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to see. This is very much framed as like it's broadcast television. They pulled him off the air, but most people were not even watching him on the air.
Mhm.
Exactly. And how does that relate to like censorship, freedom of speech? Because obviously there was a huge amount of backlash against Jimmy Kimmel getting pulled off the air, because I think that's a really traditional broadcast medium where people can really clearly say like shouldn't cancel someone's show. That's obviously blocking freedom of
Right.
speech. Whereas people might say, for example, shutting down TikTok is fine, even though that obviously is going to cut off a lot of people's speech also because it's the internet, which is somehow different and not real or like less serious
Yeah.
or
Like
something.
in like FCC terms, there's a distinction drawn between broadcast TV, which is like public access, everyone has access to it as long as you have like an antenna, versus cable TV versus then like the internet, because there's this idea of the stuff that you need to pay to get access to, which the internet is kind of in that umbrella, which is like that's a whole other side topic of you have to pay to get access to the internet, because it's like I personally don't think you should, and so we should be treating the internet more like a utility. But yeah, that's like the public access TV. Like that is the TV that everybody nominally has access to. And like, yeah, granted, there's like a small barrier to entry in terms of like you need a television and you need a receiver, but you don't have to pay a subscription to get access to it the same way as like cable or the internet. So that's sort of like I think where that distinction is coming from. Especially because, like, I want to say it wasn't just Next Star. I think it was also Sinclair was the other.
Yeah.
The latest article that I'm reading, this is from NPR, says that both of them have kind of gone back on their position now. Everybody can watch Kimmel again now,
Yay.
anywhere, which is good, which is actually very good, and in fact, very like
Yes.
not just like even like us are like yay, it's like that's genuinely great.
Yes. I'm glad we
Oh,
had a line.
yeah, exactly. Like a line has in fact been drawn. The government overstepped, people reacted, and that reaction had an effect, and that was fantastic. And I think especially it's the fact that like what Kimmel said was so mild. Like
Yes.
it was like the most just like milk toast of takes. Like you could interpret this as him calling this guy MAGA, sure, but also like I want to say that like the information that we had available at the time on the killer was that he was like raised in a conservative household, and um and was from a family that had that sort of ideology. Because the thing is, like, we have way more evidence of this guy being right wing than we do of him being left wing. And so it's like Kimmel was hedging his bets on like something that seemed pretty apparent to anybody who was looking at the
Yeah.
facts of the situation, but also like wasn't even saying all that much.
Yes. No, it's like it's one of those like hypocrisy things again, because like what he was
Mhm.
doing was pointing out all the right wing people who are declaring unequivocally that he was not MAGA and that he was
Right.
left wing. So,
Mhm.
and like I guess you could say that's implying that the reverse is true, but
But it's not.
not we don't know either of those things are true, so the other one should also be a problem.
Yeah.
But yeah, looping back to broadcast television, the regulations around it are different, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
And like the public perception around it is different, which is part of it, because you've got a whole
Yeah.
bunch of like boomers or Gen X's who love Jimmy Kimmel up in arms about it, whereas you wouldn't have in a bunch of other situations.
Mhm.
Um,
It's a little bit
but
of
like,
Streisand effect like that, where it's like, I feel like, yeah, like Jimmy Kimmel's gonna have great numbers for a little while now because people who did not genuinely care about him at all are probably now like, well, I'm watching him just to like show support. And it's like,
yeah,
congratulations, you've boosted Kimmel's numbers.
yeah, but yeah, that's also though like in terms of like actual access of people who
Hmm.
are watching things, how many people are watching broadcast television with an antenna on a television versus how many
Hmm.
people have the internet? Like there are a lot of people
Yeah.
who have a smartphone maybe, but not even like a place to put a television or
Yeah. Yeah, like I can't really comment on that because I feel like I like that's something that I would love to like dig into further in terms of research. I don't know like what the actual like division of numbers is for how many people are still actually watching broadcast television. This is like where I get into this whole like internet as a utility needs to be a thing
hmm
is because like in more rural areas and in like these like in places where it's like you may not have like reliable internet access, like you do still have reliable broadcast television access. And so it's the way for people to get information. And so, yeah, so like purely by the numbers, probably not that large, but like, but also I think bigger than, I feel like it's a bigger number than you would think. Less so than like, smart TVs and like streaming
yeah,
services. I feel like it's more like, yeah, like cell phones, which I think is part of probably why like you're seeing a lot of this Gen Z getting a lot of their information from TikTok
yep,
because that's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if I have, if I have a cell phone and either like an unlimited data plan or access to a place with public Wi-Fi, then I have the ability to get my information from this app that's free, which you could probably extend this a little bit into like, is this kind of a product of like paywalling a lot of different like news media sites and stuff like that? Again, like talking about how both of us were sort of like raised as the internet was growing up and sort of grew up with the internet. Um, that's something that I find very fascinating in terms of we're talking like freedom of information and accessibility of like news and stuff like that. How like so many news sites have gone like paywall, and there's like this weird like distrust of institutions on the internet, which I blame Facebook for. If a site is asking me to sign up, if it's asking me to provide personal information, it kind of like it hits this sort of like, what are you gonna do with that sort of like ick factor, you know? So it does. I don't know. My point is meandering here, but I'm just kind of
yeah. No, I was
like
gonna say
about like yeah.
I can loop it back around. Just give me a second.
Sounds good. Go
So
for it.
so yeah, I think that
Mm,
goes back to some of the age verification stuff that we were talking about, which is that
yeah.
that can put off people or resources. Like even just giving your email address can put you off of being like, I don't want to look at this
Yeah.
website anymore. Let
Hmm.
alone be like, I have to upload an ID or whatever. Which is one
Hmm.
of the things that YouTube was doing to do some sort of adult content blocking for kids and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Which bringing back around to Jimmy Kimmel and how it was on YouTube, like that's it's really interesting because that's a really a one-to-one comparison. It's the same content, and
Yeah.
6.2 million people watched it on broadcast television, and 22 million people have watched it on YouTube.
Yeah.
So would that be adult? Could
Mm,
it have been adult if he was a little bit more vulgar in it? Like probably. Like that's the thing that happens on YouTube is that kind of stuff gets marked as adult content.
yeah.
Um, and then people couldn't see it without uploading their ID. So then it's not
Yeah.
really as free and easily available as you might imagine. And a lot of people are like, well, that's fine because it's YouTube, whatever. People don't have to watch their prank videos. But it's like, no, like almost 4 times as many people watched Jimmy Kimmel's monologue on YouTube as they did on
Hmm.
TV. That's how
Yeah.
most people saw it. So like
Hmm.
it's it's how people are getting not just like news generally, but even like specific news that would normally be on broadcast television. Like I know I
Yeah.
saw a lot of clips from news when I was more actively following it leading up to the election, mostly on YouTube clips and not actually like
Hmm.
watching television. So
Yeah.
that's a thing that people do a lot. So I think that's interesting.
It is interesting. In like the statistics like niggling in my brain is like it's like yeah, like that's a very interesting slice, but it's also interesting in terms of like how those two different data sources are represented because I feel like there's not a one-to-one from a view on broadcast television to a view on YouTube. Like a broadcast TV view could be like three people watching on a television set in a home or something like that. And a YouTube view can very well be just like one person watching. And so it's like it's like you've got technically multiple views to one
Yes.
view.
Well, a YouTube view could also be 3 people watching it on a television.
It could
Actually, that's how
also,
I watched it. Me and Dan were
yeah.
sitting together watching it on television. So
No, yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
my one view is actually 2. So
Yeah, but like it's like but yeah, it can go both ways. But I think also part of that is also the reach of YouTube is broader than the reach of broadcast. This is like has to do with just how technology is evolving in society and how slow society is to adapt to technology evolution sometimes. Yeah, like we talk about how broadcast TV is the thing that's broadly accessible to people. But YouTube is broadly more accessible to more people because I'd be
Mhm.
very curious to see like how many of those views are international, because it was such a big deal that I feel like a lot of people were watching to see like what's going to happen. Is this going to be like a chilling effect for, like future media? And, it's like especially if like there's a people who like just people who enjoy Jimmy Kimmel, but also people who are just like have a like stake or an interest in like media content in the United States would be very interested in like how does this pan out? And then yeah, like when Jimmy Kimmel comes back, it's like obviously you're gonna want to watch that to see okay, well, what does he have to say now? It's like you have
Yes.
gotten essentially uncensored, and so it's like, what are you going to say now that you kind of survived this
Mhm.
ordeal and such like that. So I also I'd want to know like what's the heat map of where those broadcast views were coming from.
Yeah.
It's like who was watching? Like I want to know who was watching. Not just like the numbers on the sites, but also just like more broad kind of like level of information and detail. I think you could draw a lot of conclusions from that about, yeah, like,
Mhm.
what is the common mode of consuming this sort of content these days. But yeah, the internet is very much more becoming that kind of broadcast TV thing. And so it's like it's weird that it's still treated differently. And I feel like if we wanted it to not be treated differently, we would have to turn the internet essentially into a utility and kind of understand that access to the internet is a basic fundamental thing that in this day and age you should be able to have. So it's
Yeah.
kind of like electricity in that way, like running water in that way. To deny people access to the internet feels like it is denying them access to like a very fundamental access to information and
Mhm.
community and stuff like that.
It's news, it's community, it's a lot of things. There's people like it's poisoning our children, smartphones, blah, blah, blah. Everyone
Hmm.
just needs to log off. And it's like, okay, but that's where information comes from.
Yeah.
And do you just want to cut off all information? I feel like for some people the answer is yes, but
Yeah.
um
No, yeah, it's like certainly there are parts of the internet that are poison, but it's like there are parts of the internet that are not. And so it's kind of like saying it's like, oh, well, like I don't like this one comic in the newspaper and therefore no one should read newspapers at all ever. And it's like no one would say that. That seems a very like silly, like ridiculous thing to say. But yeah.
the whole thing just kind of interesting as a case study and how people talk about traditional media versus digital media, I think. And the fact that
Yeah.
obviously the core of this was about broadcast TV and getting canceled on broadcast TV, but so
Hmm.
much of it was happening in digital media in the sense that
Yeah.
like Brendan Carr was on a podcast and
Hmm.
Jimmy Kimmel got more views on YouTube than he did on actual television. So it's just like
Yeah.
it was a television show, but like a lot of the actual discourse was on the internet. So
Yeah.
I don't know exactly what my takeaway from this is. It's just a really interesting case study in how people think and talk about it, I think. So,
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like it is just kind of that telling thing of like the evolution of technology of media and stuff like that. I know that there were a lot of like Reddit communities and stuff, there were people organizing um essentially against like Nexstar and Sinclair stations to basically be like, "Oh, hey, go find your local advertisers who are advertising like on ABC and contact them to say, "Hey, did you know that your advertisements are airing on this station that banned Jimmy Kimmel? Do you agree with that?" And it's like, and if you do, then it's like, well, cool, I'm never going to buy your products again, kind of
yep.
thing. So it's so fascinating how it's all very interconnected in that way, where it's like this the organization and the community aspects of it. A lot of that was happening online, but but online in a way to kind of drive people towards these like more local sort of grassroots movements. You can't deny the fact that like if the internet didn't exist, this would have been so different. Like even though like the comments that like Carmaid were on a podcast, like there's no way for us to know whether or not there was a conversation with like somebody at Disney. Or if he hadn't had a podcast to go and like talk on, would he have contacted Disney? Like would this have crossed the line a bit? Because there was also what is it, that recent Supreme Court case um where the court basically said it's like, hey, no, like a government agent can't coerce a private company to like do what the government agent wants, essentially. And so it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
it's like you were super acting out of turn. We haven't even like dug into the fact it's like, ah, yes, the head of the FCC is showing up on, alt-right podcasts while in his position as head of the
Yeah.
FCC, which I would argue is a huge friggin' like conflict of interest, red flag, impeach that man level of like, what the hell are you doing?
Yeah.
Because also like FCC is one of those things. It's like that's not supposed to be a politically biased position. Like that's supposed to be one of these
Yes.
more you're here to keep the machine running kind of positions. That's a huge red flag that we haven't even talked about. I don't know. Don't really want to talk
Been
about it
talking.
too much.
Yeah. We
Mhm.
also haven't talked about the whole thing where like both of these big companies, Nexstar and ABC slash or Disney, have things
Mhm.
that they're trying to get approval from the FCC for in the near
Yeah,
future,
yeah,
mergers or acquisitions, and that was
yeah.
probably a fairly strong
Mhm.
influence on them not wanting to get on Brendan Carr's bad side. So it's just there's so much of it is just literally quid pro quo bullshit that
Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't say censorship aside because like it was motivated by the censorship. There's just so much wrong with this that is just like very, very chilling, and I'm very glad that it did turn out the way it did.
yes, yeah. And yeah, if people are interested in this, there's people who've written a lot about it. They can go read more,
Mhm.
especially some of the merger stuff, which I think is super interesting. But yeah,
Yeah.
the angle that I wanted to take on it for our podcast was looking at the digital media angle because I think that's interesting and not something that a lot of people have been
Yeah.
highlighting, and in fact have been like downplaying in the way where I mentioned like a lot of the quotes of Brendan Carr don't mention where he said this at all. They just sort of quote
Mhm.
him. And there are a lot of headlines that like Jimmy Kimmel got 4 times his normal viewership on his comeback day, and a lot less headlines that he got another 3 times that on YouTube.
Mhm.
Um, so, and again, those numbers aren't 1 to 1 necessarily, but like it's a huge number of people
Yeah.
that are just not seeing it on television. So,
Mhm. No, yeah. It's very it is very fascinating. Yeah.
um, both Meta and OpenAI over this past week or so have launched basically products that are TikTok but only AI videos. So
Mm.
Meta's is called Vibes.
No.
The Hard Fork podcast quote was like calling it Vibes is cringe. I say as a 38-year-old man, and it's like, yeah, that's true.
Yes, yes. I as a 39-year-old woman also think that's cringe. That's real friggin' cringe, buddy.
They also on Hard Fork called it Cocomelon for adults, where it is just like a bunch of content lists, just random 8-second clips of animated things like cats or whatever.
Mm,
And obviously there's a ton of AI video slop on Instagram already. There has been.
yeah.
They just created its own place for it. And it's not really a social network. Like you can follow people, but obviously they're not posting anything that has to do with themselves. They're just posting AI slop. Then shortly after that, like 5 days later, OpenAI announced their version of this, along with their new version of their video generator. So Sora 2 came with the Sora app, which has a feed of videos in it. And they are doing at least something slightly different with that because they wanted to make it more social, I guess, such that you
Hmm.
have friends and do connections. So when you sign on to it, you basically create a Cameo AI version of you that they can generate. So you can generate
Hmm.
videos that have you in it, and you can give permission to your friends to also generate videos with you in them if you want, such that your friends can make videos of both of you, AI videos, that are like
Mm.
theoretically fun things, which is at least slightly
Mm.
more interesting than an AI slop feed.
Yeah.
And but most of this feed apparently in the first few days was Sam Altman doing stuff because he left his open permissions for anyone to make videos of him on the entire app. So one of the most popular videos was him stealing a bunch of GPUs from like a convenience store or something like that. So
I do like that. I admit when you said like, oh, Sam Altman left himself open, I was like thinking it was going to be something worse than just stealing GPUs. But I
yeah, I
imagine
think
they'd
they
have
do have still have
content.
some content guardrails
Yeah,
on that,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. But
yeah, so they have
still,
content guardrails on it. They have watermarking. So if you like export videos from this app, it has a like this is AI generated thing on it, and
yeah.
you're not allowed to screen capture from the app. So they're doing some guarding on it,
Mm,
like more than it could be, I guess. But
yeah. Because that is interesting. Because like the first thing that I think about when I hear that is like, this might actually be a good thing, question mark. Because if it's like, okay, cool, take your AI slop and put it here, this is the AI slop pile, yeah, that might actually get some AI slop out of everybody else's feeds. If you're like, I'm a young, I don't know, AI slop creator, I can't get into this persona too well because I don't understand the motivations, but if you're like, somebody who's creating these things genuinely and you're like, cool, here's a place just for me. Here's a place where like people will go to look for these things and people who like these things will go there. I feel like then you're not as likely to post it elsewhere in a weird way. So that's kind of like my thought process on it is like that could be a good thing. One thing I also do like about um the Sora one that you mentioned was like having the watermark on it, having it be something that is very clearly identified and shown to be AI, because that's one of the biggest problems. It's the frustrating thing about AI is like it is getting very good very fast, because I do remember just a couple of years ago AI made a video and it's a bunch of weird little blobs moving around on a screen that you could barely call anything, and now it's like, what was it? I saw one, it was like, oh, was it? I was on the like Reddit board, AI or not, because like Reddit now
Mhm.
has like an entire board that is just dedicated to like, hi, is this AI? I need to know. And one of them that people had posted was like this video of like a dog dragging a trash bag into a living room and scattering the trash all over the floor, and then bonking the TV with its nose so the TV fell down onto the trash, and then like, the people come back and like look at this mess and the dog runs away. And it's like, and it's like, at first glance I was like, I feel like this is AI, but there's not any of that, those usual tells. It's like the dog looked
Mhm.
like a dog, the TV looked like a TV. I didn't see like pieces of trash morphing into each other between shots and stuff like that. So it's more like, no, but like the physics of it didn't quite work right, and the movements were too stilted. And so it's like it's becoming more like
Yeah.
difficult.
Though apparently Sora 2 is better at physics, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is why, yeah, I'm like, please, for the love of God, like putting a watermark on these things and keeping them to a place where it's like, this is the AI place, I think is actually a good thing. So much nicer than having to like play this like constantly evolving game of whack-a-mole where, it's like the moles look less and less like moles every single time, and I'm just having to
yes.
like, is that a mole? I don't know anymore kind of thing.
Yes, you just have to stare at the mole for 5 minutes while you're trying to whack it, which
Right,
doesn't really,
right.
it's not really how whack-a-mole works. So
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
takes longer to figure it out if it's a mole than it does to generate the mole.
Yeah.
So there's that. On the more negative side, obviously, given that people already think TikTok is rotting children's brains, the
Yeah.
feed of that is TikTok but AI generated and therefore infinite has not been going over well with a certain set of people.
No, I imagine not.
One tweet that Casey Newton quoted in his newsletter and also on Hard Fork was basically like, we're now announcing the infinite slot machine that destroys children from the hit book. Don't build the infinite slot machine that destroys children.
Oh, yeah. That old classic. Don't build the
Yes.
torture nexus.
Yeah, Torment
God.
Nexus, I think. But
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, Torment Nexus, yeah.
which is funny and true. And like
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people apparently, even at OpenAI, were really unsure about this because again, OpenAI is
Yeah.
supposed to be building AI for the benefit of humanity and
Mm-hmm.
not building the infinite slot machine that rots people's brains theoretically. And they did not really make an argument for it being good for humanity. Exactly. They were kind of like hand wavy of something creativity, but also we need to make money because AI costs a whole lot of money, more or less. So, and the way to make money is have a feed of things where they can presumably put ads in at some point.
Yeah. And also, like, the business model for so many social media things is advertising. It's like, well, if you're going to advertise in the slop mines, then your ads have to be slop, question mark. Otherwise, it's very obvious that you're being served an ad. I feel like in order to like not be disruptive to the experience that somebody is having in the slop pit, you kind of need to make your ads look like slop so that somebody isn't
So then we have branded
like,
slop, which is
yeah, that's worse. They don't like it.
yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, it's so bleh.
But yeah, if you're OpenAI and you're trying to spend whatever 100 billion, hundreds of billions, trillions of dollars, I forget what their
Yeah.
latest quote was. It was something insane about how much money they're trying to spend on this. There is not really a good way to advertise in ChatGPT.
No.
Like people have talked about how to do that, where it's just like maybe it'll recommend you products or something like that, or it'll like occasionally you'll get an ad alongside your chat, but it's like no, people don't want that.
Yeah.
But a TikTok like feed has a much more traditional advertising format, so they have that now.
Yeah, well, and yeah, it does like boil back to that conversation I think we were having like, I don't know, last week. It's like you don't have a business model. Like you don't have like a P&L that makes any sense. I kind of like had to laugh a little bit when you're like, oh yes, traditional advertising in like the TikTok way, where it's just like, yes,
Yes.
that fine honored tradition of TikTok. But it is just like, well, very traditionally you would sell the product, you would charge people for access to the product. And so it's like, so ostensibly it's like, well, you should be charging people like the business model. And I know that they do have like subscriptions or what have you for
They
like
do have
OpenAI and
subscriptions. They
stuff
have
like
Pro. They have
it's
like $200 a
yeah.
month just subscription if you want to use their cool
Yeah.
stuff. So
Yeah. And so it's like in a traditional business sense, like you would be setting that price such that would cover your operating costs and it's like your like overhead and all of those different things. But yeah, it's like, but as it turns out, you can't.
I was gonna say operating costs is one thing. And if you listen to Sam Altman, they're actually around break even on actual operating costs. So in terms of like running the inference for ChatGPT, like when it runs, they are making enough money to pay for that. What they are not making enough money for is R&D, which is actually training the models and paying all of the AI researchers that they have working on it. So
and so yeah, so it's like, ooh, wow, cool, you have covered your operating costs, great, but that's not the entire equation, and you have essentially failed at creating a sustainable business model. Congratulations. I think my biggest frustration about AI is the fact that none of them have created it as an actual like sustainable business model. None of them have actually made a thing that will stand on its own without like so much investor money propping it up. It seems like such a mass delusion. It's so frustrating that like so many people are like, this is the future. And it's like, No, this is a thing that like can't support its own weight. And we've talked about this with like copyright and stuff like that. If you take out the foundation you have built this thing on, it no longer functions. It just drives me crazy. It drives me actually crazy. The base of it is flawed.
Yeah, and I mean, it could do some cool things now, but they still want to spend, I think, $1 trillion more on it
Oh my
on
god,
OpenAI,
no, no.
something like that. It's like, how are they even getting that much money? They're like, I don't know, something creative financing that they're going to announce soon. So I'm out to say we're going to
Yeah.
try some more creative things because it's like that's more money than like anyone invests in anything ever. And it's like, but they're building AGI, so that's justified or whatever. And it's like perhaps like I already think that AI is pretty capable now. Maybe we could figure out how to make that work for more people now without before we put $1 trillion more into it. But no, then we might lose the race to China, so we can't do that. One other thing about the Sora thing is that they are requiring copyright holders to opt out if they don't want any of their content to be in it. Even like big companies, they're like, if you don't want people to make videos of your
Disney.
IP,
Yeah.
Disney even, like you have to opt out. You have to let us know specifically.
God.
Which does kind of align with what we were seeing in the WAPO article that we were discussing last week, which is it looks like what they have is explicit blocks on brand names in prompts, basically, or things that are associated with brands in prompts. They're just blocking it on the very specific
prompt end.
Yeah, and with a explicit list of things to block. So basically, if you ask, they will put you in their list of things to block, is how I'm envisioning that this happens.
Which, as we discussed last week, wasn't actually all that effective in getting the model to not spit out very branded looking content.
It was very not. Yeah. So that's cool.
Love that.
So another thing that happens a lot in the venture world is people being like, well, it funds risk takers, and the people who are willing to take the risks will be the most successful founders. And I've had many arguments with people about this at startup events because it's like you need a safety net to take risks. You need the willingness to take insane risks to like make a startup work, which doesn't work if you know that like you're not going to be able to live if you lose all of your money, which is a situation that most people are in. So segue, universal basic income. Among the other things that universal basic income it can be a solution for is actually prompting more innovation, because if there are more people who are like, I have a minimum bar that I cannot fall below, I'm not going to like end up on the street if this thing that I'm trying doesn't succeed, people are willing to try more things. That's a thing that logically makes sense, and also people have seen a lot of times, is that they're willing to take more risks if they know that the risk is not going to make them lose everything, which is like obviously very intuitive. But I think it's not something that people think about a lot when it comes to, we want people to be being more creative and taking more risks and stuff like that. Because
which is so silly, because like I feel like that's like the base of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like you need safety and security kind of thing. It's like you need those very basic needs met, and then once those basic needs get met, and I could like comment a little bit about, it's like, is risky behavior really the thing you want for running a sustainable business? It's like, I don't know. I don't like. I'm not talking out of any sort of experience here. This is just personally my opinion. It's like, I don't actually think that's the greatest idea. Like for ideas, maybe. But
like
I don't think it's actually what you want for running a business.
I mean, I think for new businesses, you have to take risks. And I think actually a lot of the venture system is very risk averse, in the sense where it's like, I went out fundraising and I talked to a bunch of VCs, and many of them said, oh wow, that's a really interesting and new idea, and therefore I'm not going to give you money because it doesn't fall into my investment thesis. It's like, so, but if it doesn't fall into anyone's investment thesis, how do I get money for this new and innovative idea that everyone thinks is actually kind of cool, but is not the sort of thing that they personally fund, because that would be weird. It's like that. So
it's very like, I don't know, very contradictory in many ways. But universal basic income.
Universal basic income. So we have a few different things that were in the universal basic income newsletter that I follow this month.
Mhm.
One is a Wall Street Journal article that is titled "A Guaranteed Income Won't Stop People from Wanting to Work,"
Mhm.
which is written by a couple of economists for the Wall Street Journal, basically summarizing this point, which has been verified by a lot of studies at this point, but it's still kind of just
Yeah.
like the common rebuttal to universal basic income is this like people will just be lazy and not work. That has
No.
proven to not be the case. They quote, I think, 7 different studies in here about
Mhm.
different sort of UBI or UBI adjacent studies that almost all show people will actually do more or they'll succeed more or they'll in many ways be more creative because if they have a reliable thing to fall back on, they can try more things and they don't have to just like do the reliable thing that is going to get them money all of the
Yeah.
time.
It is weird how, like, every time a UBI study comes out, it's like, "Hey, UBI is great, actually, and none of the things the detractors say about it are true, and it generates more money for people, it causes, like, communities to be safer, it, like, has, like, all of these, like, myriad benefits," and every single time people are like, "Oh, that's great," and then nobody implements UBI. It's like so many studies now have come out and been like, UBI
Hmm.
is actually really good. It actually generates income. It makes people happier. It makes people safer. It like people keep working. It's good for the economy. And it's like, how many of these studies do we need to have before like somebody somewhere does this in a more permanent way and not just for a study? Because it's like all the
Yes.
economists and who've done the studies are just like, we're ready anytime you want to. We could totally do this thing. It would be great. It would make
Yep.
everybody like it would make the world better. And it's like, and everybody else is like, nah. It's just like, what's
Yeah,
wrong?
or like they don't know that that's true, which is why I want to talk about this on the
Yeah.
podcast here, and also why I think the Wall Street Journal is why they put that in there because it is like
Hmm.
economists know they've seen all of the studies, but I think the general
Hmm.
public doesn't know.
Yeah.
Um, and like yeah, we've talked about UBI again is like that could solve
Hmm.
everything hypothetically, like if we had it, but it's not just like a magical thing that we're waving. People have actually been doing studies on this, and there's evidence that it will help.
Yeah.
And you can go look at these studies. You can look at all of this Wall Street Journal article, and then this other
Hmm.
one that I have in here is a specific study that happened in Ireland that was called
Hmm.
Basic Income for the Arts, specifically, which I think is interesting to and
Yeah.
relevant to us. And basically, they said that it generated more economic and social value than it cost.
Yeah.
And that's with some estimates of like the value of social benefits. They have a lot of stuff in here where it's just like gains in well-being, cultural value for audiences, total social value benefits. So it's like they got more of their income from doing actual arts work versus other stuff outside. So like people could
Yeah.
get a basic income and stop working their like barista job or whatever and actually do some more art.
Hmm.
Was things that they saw. And obviously we're generating more stuff for actual society, um, things like that. So like
Yeah.
there's a lot of studies, and I think this one was interesting to be like, yeah, actually it's going to overall benefit society. It's going to be a net positive for society if we
Yeah.
put this in place.
Yeah. You'll get more of it than you put into it. Yeah. Because I think like they did one in like Canada, I want to say like a while back. It's like the dollar you spend on giving somebody basic income will be paid back to you. It's a good return on investment. It's like you
Yeah,
it will
it's like
not
a very
it's
it's a
not
very
a
high
drag.
leverage.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a very high leverage with place to put money. Whereas like if
right.
I gave someone who already has $1 million another like 40K a year or something like that, what is that going to do for
Mhm.
them? Nothing. But if I gave
Nothing.
to someone who is not making very much money an extra 40K a year, they're going to spend that on stuff like so,
Right,
and
right.
be able to make material changes in their life with it, which is
Mhm.
really important. So
Of a net benefit to society. Yeah, it's like it's like, was it the rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing. I'm not surprised by the findings because, again, to the point of the Wall Street Journal article, there's been so many studies on this and they all like agree with one another. You're assuming that it's going to be a drain on society, these people aren't going to work or whatever. No, like done it time and time again, and you keep on doing this in different places and it keeps on bearing the same results. That is a sound economic theory, that you can give people basic income and it will pay back dividends and you will get money back from it.
yeah, the cynical interpretation of the it'll stop people from wanting to work thing is
Mhm.
that they feel like there needs to be an underclass basically, which is that
Yeah.
people need to be desperate enough to do work that they don't want to do. Like, we need people working at McDonald's or whatever. Although this class of person, I think, would say it's only teenagers working at McDonald's, which has never been true either. But like, there has to be people who are doing work that people don't want to do
Mm-hmm.
because they have to live. And like, I mean, ideally not.
Now, there's so much to unpack in that statement because it's like, I'm just like, it's like, well, actually, ideally, you should not have any work that is work that people don't want to do. It's like there is dignity in work. I remember like my first job in high school was I was working at a Build-A-Bear workshop. It's
Mhm.
like I was working a silly little retail job, making teddy bears and having birthday parties for kids. I loved that job. I genuinely had so much fun. I enjoyed it a lot, and it's like I loved like I thought my coworkers were great. I liked the work that I did. It was fantastic. I would argue there are people out there who I think genuinely enjoy working at McDonald's because there is enjoyment that can be found in a role like that. And in fact, you probably want the people who enjoy working at McDonald's because then they'll like that will kind of like bear out in the quality of service and the quality of product that you get from McDonald's.
I guess the assumption there, to like continue on the hypothetical, is there are not enough people who enjoy working at McDonald's to staff all of the McDonald's that people want to buy, which I would believe is true because it's not like the most
I don't
fun
know.
job.
I don't know if it's because the thing is like I quite frankly think like if you didn't need to work at McDonald's to get a living wage, like I don't know, like, I think there would be kind of a little bit of an upheaval, like because it's like you would get enough people to work at McDonald's, but I think you'd need to make McDonald's a place where people wanted to work.
Yes, I was gonna say there's the whole emotional labor part of it also, which is like the customer's
Mhm.
always right, Karen, whatever.
Yeah,
They're there to serve you because they're lesser than you. Like,
yeah.
whole aesthetic. Theoretically, again, if you people had a universal basic income, then they could just quit their McDonald's
Yeah.
job that was emotionally draining and terrible, and they could
Hmm.
only work at the McDonald's job if people were nice to them.
Yeah.
And that's, again, I think, implied thing that people don't want to be able to happen. They want to have the class of people that they can abuse, is like the
And
harsh
be
way to
yeah.
say it, but
Yeah, no,
yeah.
I do think you're correct in that there are people who are just like, oh, but I need somebody to be lesser than me, and if there's nobody who is lesser than me, how will I survive? And it's just like, go away. That's how you survive. Get
Yeah.
used to the modest discomfort of living around other people.
Yeah, and
Um,
it's like, I think a lot of those people wouldn't even think of it exactly like that, like, literally
mhm.
in their mind, they wouldn't think I need people that are lesser than me. They
No.
would just be like, but there are people that are lesser than me, and they should
Hmm.
be working jobs that I can take advantage of. And if they can't do
Yeah.
that, then how do I get all the things that I need?
Hmm.
Um, which is
Because this is maybe like over idealizing it, but I think back to restaurants became a thing without like anybody forcing it. There have been people who are like, "Oh, I like making food. I want to share my food with people. I am going to make a restaurant where people will pay me to give them
yeah,
food." It's like that's not a thing that needs to be forced on society. And yeah, and I do feel like universal basic income, and this is maybe me being like overly socialistically idealist or something like that. But it's like I do feel like if you had that, I think it would be a positive step towards kind of like encouraging a lot of these like deemed lesser professions or whatever to achieve that level of dignity of work, because now it's like, okay, well, if McDonald's wants people to continue working at their restaurants, they need to make it good. They need to make it like enjoyable to work in a McDonald's.
yeah. I think it would dramatically change the entire restaurant industry, is what it would
Oh
do.
yes. Oh
Because
yes.
like, part of the thing, reason McDonald's exists and is as popular as it is that the margins in the restaurant industry are just so low, and
Yeah.
like, you do not make money in the restaurants because you have to buy food, and there's a lot of work that goes into making it and to
Hmm.
delivering it if you're doing delivery and stuff like that. And like, if you're paying people a living wage, your food is really expensive, and like,
Yeah.
that works out badly. Like, that the economics of
Hmm.
that just don't work. I talk about this with like Uber food delivery apps a lot, which is like, if it takes someone half an hour to bring the food to your house and you're paying that person $20 an hour, then it costs minimum $10 to get the food to your house.
Yep.
Like, that's just how the math works, and
Yeah.
there's nothing that you can do that's going to change that. And if you're buying a sandwich, then you're paying $10 to have it delivered to your house. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So just like, there's a fundamental brokenness to the economics
Mm-hmm.
of food delivery there. But again, it's like if we had universal basic income and like people being tied to this job as their way to pay their rent was not a constraint, like
Mm-hmm.
we could have restaurants that people are doing just because they like cooking food,
Yeah.
perhaps, because they don't need to make the margins work for them
Right.
that much. Like obviously they would still like to make money on this, presumably, so they're like can make their way up in the world, but they're not just like if I can't make this restaurant work, I'm gonna die. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Yeah, way you can kind of think about it is like retirees who are like on social security who kind of have
yep.
this universal basic income. It's like, what do they
Mhm.
do with their time? It's like, look at that. And like both my parents are retired, and like my mom does like volunteer stuff to,
Mhm.
um, tutor kids at the high school. Like they do Lego League and all sorts of things. And it's like, that's because they like doing those things. They actually like, there's this thing in Minneapolis where my parents live called Loaves and Fishes, which is basically like,
Mhm.
distributing cooking meals for the poor and stuff like that. And they go and do that multiple times a week. And so it's like, to imply that people don't want to work in a restaurant just because
Yeah.
they're not being paid is insane. But also like there are like I firmly believe there are people for every job. Like there are people who love every job in the world, even the weird ones, because it's like, quite frankly, it's like, because I've watched enough dirty jobs, to see like, no, even the really weird jobs that like I would never, there's somebody out there who's like, oh man, this brings me joy every single day, like coming, doing plumbing or like working in a landfill or whatever. There's people who really enjoy those things, would perhaps have a little bit of upheaval where you would have to make it such that people want to work at McDonald's. I feel like it would be beneficial overall. Like I
Yeah.
don't think that's actually a bad thing for like the employers to have to make their job environment something that is and I
Yeah.
think that that's actually a good thing, maybe. Consider that. And I don't think it stops at like restaurant industry and what we consider like service jobs. I think it
Yeah.
does extend up at least into like kind of the bottom part of corporate work, because I think we've had plenty of friends who have even worked at like Amazon who it's just like, yeah, I'm doing this like very, very grunt work position at like Amazon because I need a paycheck. Like I do think you would see some people being like, "Oh, I don't have to do this like, grunty customer service
Yes.
or."
Completely
Yeah.
meaningless spreadsheet job or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's like I think you would see people leaving those jobs. I think you could probably also see people leaving like potentially more lucrative jobs that they just don't like. The shuffling realignment of labor, I think, would fall more into lines of people actually doing what they want to be doing and
Mhm.
less doing things because they feel like they have to be doing it. And I don't think that means that like we would see any industry disappear completely. I just do think that it would change like
Yeah.
the labor environment. And honestly, I think it would change it for the better.
Yeah. Um, I agree that there are people like lots of different things. There are an
Yeah.
infinite variety of people in the world, and that's why people are
Yeah.
great. I'm not sure I
Yes.
believe that there's a perfect mapping of people who like jobs to the quantity of those jobs that exist in our current economy, but also, especially the lower level spreadsheet job, AI.
Yeah.
Back to AI again, like we've talked about before, when you talk to AGI people, they're always like, it's going to replace all of the jobs and we will need some kind of social safety net because they're like, okay, AI can obviously do these low level spreadsheet jobs. It's already doing those, like the pure
Mhm.
data entry and stuff like that, or even low level software engineering jobs. It can replace all of those.
Mhm.
It could be theoretically be robots at McDonald's, although that didn't go that well apparently, and they were experimenting with it. I don't know if it's McDonald's. I think Taco Bell was trying to do
Was it?
automated voice drive-throughs that didn't go that
Oh,
well.
but that's the wrong place to put it. That's
I
I feel like that's
know,
the
like
wrong
that's the
place to put
problem.
it. Yeah. But like honestly, I feel like though if yeah, like to your point, I'll grant like probably there's not like the right proportion of people who like jobs to jobs that need to be done, but then it's like, but hey, now we have, these people who want to do those jobs have more incentive to innovate, and they are
Yes.
more comfortable taking risks. And so I feel like you would then see like, okay, how can we take the limited number of people who want to be McDonald's burger flippers or like people working in waste management and then force multiply them into like making it so that
Yeah.
the number of people who want to do those jobs covers the amount of work that needs to be done. It's like I feel like you would be making just the perfect environment to innovate in that way, and you would see
Yeah.
technology
That's
advance in that way.
yeah, that's definitely true. And I feel like it's very frustrating talking with, again, like the kind of started people who are just like, well, we need only the really cool, like rich people can innovate. That's not what they say. But they're like
No,
people who are smart already have money, just like tautologically is what they think, which is obviously not true.
that's so
But
not
also, it's
true.
just like as a overall statement, I feel like the world where everyone is working at the jobs that they think are cooler and interesting, and we have a shortfall of people in the jobs that people we don't think are cool and interesting, is probably a better direction for society to be going in
Yeah,
overall, and we can just figure out how to make that work. Like that's
yeah,
where technology comes in, right? Like we're supposed to be
yeah.
solving the problems and making society better. Like that's the goal, not doing B2B SaaS. I thought.
Yeah, 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 because yeah, it's like then you take like the people who's like, oh no, it's like, well, like where am I gonna get to innovate? It's like here's problems. It's like kind of to my point about AI. The thing that bothers me about AI to no end is like you have not looked at a problem and tried to find a solution. You have created a solution and you're trying to find a problem for it. It's like, yeah, like if you wind up in that situation where you have labor shortage for these like undesirable roles, it's like, congratulations, you found a problem. Now come up with a solution. And it's like that's how it's supposed to work, you know?
Yeah, and it's like I do genuinely think that AI as a technology could improve society, but we have to
Yeah.
apply it to improving society and not where it can increase profit margins, because those are two
Hmm.
different things.
Yeah. Society is not a profit margin.
Yeah, and I think I think those things are not necessarily in conflict. There are a lot of people who
Yeah.
are really big in AI who are like everyone's anti AI, just like is anti technology and doesn't want progress or
No.
whatever. And it's like I don't think that's true. I think it's
Mm-mm.
possible to like believe that technological progress is possible and also believe that our current system is not really set up for that to happen well,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and that it shouldn't come at a cost of many things.
Many, 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 many things, as we have
And
discussed.
doesn't need to. It doesn't need
And
to come at a
yeah.
cost of like creative jobs or like etc. So
Yeah.
if people are just like a little bit more actually creative and innovative about it and not
Right.
locked into
Yeah.
whatever systems that they have.
God, and that whole concept of like the smartest people have the money. Oh my God, that's just like that's so like mired in like such a terrible worldview. Like that's so
Yes,
classist and like racist and sexist in so
that's
many different ways.
also an argument I had with an actual person at a startup event that I went
Oh
to,
no.
because we I don't remember what we were talking about, but they were also just like, well, obviously people shouldn't need money in the very early stage of their startup, because if there's someone who's good at making a startup, they will have already like worked at Amazon and had a really good paying job in the past. And people who haven't done that obviously couldn't do the startup. So that just like works out. And
Wow.
I'm like, yeah. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. As a person who is the person who worked at Amazon and could fund my startup at the beginning, I think that shouldn't be required. And I think a
Yeah.
lot of people that I know could do startups great if they had the money for it, which they don't, because that's not how
Yeah.
society works.
Oh yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, like I've like especially like going through like MBA stuff. It's like I'm like, oh man, it'd be really cool to start a business. Too bad I really do not have the funds to do that, even though I worked at Amazon for several years, but I just wasn't in the tech track. And so, like,
Yep.
I was not making as much money as other people working at Amazon. So,
Yeah.
but
Yes. And there's this whole like idealism that people have in mind about just like anyone can go create a small business and go out and you can just go like
yeah,
fundraise and you'll get funding. And it's just like that's not how funding works.
it's very fascinating because I feel like that was true, but like before Ronald Reagan, it's like I feel like that was in fact actually true in parts of US history, that it was a lot easier for people to just start
Yeah.
their
And I
own
mean that was part
business.
of Kamala Harris's platform too, is
Yeah.
you can get 50K grants for your small business or whatever. So, but alas, in some other timeline.
The happy timeline.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, anyway, so that's universal basic income. There's a lot of
Hmm.
real data out there on it that it will
Yep.
say it will be useful, and I do think it will transform society, but probably for the better. And I think that's should be relatively apparent if you even think about it for just like a second and don't assume that there needs to be a permanent underclass of people who are serving you, like even
Yes.
implicitly. Like, I understand, I have talked to the people who in good faith are like, well, yes, obviously we couldn't do UBI because people would stop working, and they just don't think about the implicit. I'm thinking of people here as a set of people I have imagined in my head that are way stupider than me and couldn't do any real jobs, and I need them to be working at McDonald's so that I can get
Mhm.
McDonald's. They would not
Yeah.
say that explicitly, nor would they like say that they're thinking that even, and they probably aren't thinking that because they're just not thinking it through that much. But
Yeah.
that's not a great way to think about people, even implicitly. Thank you for listening to the Fast and Broken podcast. I'm Carly Rector, and if you'd like to support my work, you can subscribe to my newsletter at carlyrector.substack.com.
And I've been Teresa Kramer. If you want my voice on your products, you can visit my website at teresakramer.com.
And if you enjoyed this, leave us a review. It lets us know people are listening and helps more people find the podcast. See you next week.
Bye.